Now that we're through 4 weeks of the 2016 NFL season, you can start to piece things together. You can start to figure out who the legit teams are, figure out who maybe some of the surprise teams are that have a chance to stick in it throughout the course of the season, some of the pretenders, and the never wases. Now that we're 4 weeks in, you can start to formulate some opinions. You can figure out who the elite teams are, the second tier teams are, and then everybody else, and then, of course, the Cleveland Browns. Let's talk about what we saw in week number 4 of this 2016 NFL season. First, take a look at some of the teams, the undefeated teams. You have 3 undefeated teams left after only 4 weeks through the season. You've got the Denver Broncos at 4-0, the Minnesota Vikings at 4-0, and the Philadelphia Eagles at 3-0 off of their week 4 bye. They didn't have to lose because they didn't have to play. Let's start with the Eagles first. When you look at this team, there's going to be some questions about whether or not they're legitimate, whether or not they're really a contender. I won't go so far in any sense of the imagination, as much of a Carson Wentz nut hugger as I am, to sit there and suggest in any way, shape, or form they are a legitimate, NFC contender. But based off of what I've seen, you've got a young quarterback that is learning, improving, and growing and starting to believe. A team that is starting to believe in that young quarterback who has some nice talent around him on offense, who takes care of the football, does not put his team in a lot of bad positions, and combine that with a top flight performing defense right now in the Philadelphia Eagles. They're not a championship contender, but they are an NFC East contender because that is not really a good division. So at this point in time, even with the rookie quarterback, you can look at the Eagles and say they have a chance to stick in the mix all year long. The Minnesota Vikings, you look at them, and there's going to be a lot of talk about them being Super Bowl contenders at this point in time. And frankly, I can understand that only solely based off of the fact that the NFC looks so god-awful bad at this point in time. With that said, you're going to have the idiots that are going to sit there and suggest that Sam Bradford is some great revelation for this organization, that Sam Bradford is going to lead them to the promised land, and let's get a fucking grip on ourselves here. It's not like the Minnesota Vikings have beat a bunch of top-flight teams. Furthermore, it's not like Sam Bradford has been all that particularly good. Now, granted, with that defense that they have, he probably doesn't have to be all that predictably good. Let's put it this way, though. When they start facing some real teams other than the Packers, and when it comes to nut-cutting time in big games and big situations, do you really think a Minnesota Vikings team with Sam Bradford running the show is going to have what it takes to make it to the Super Bowl? I'm just saying. The team out of the undefeated that's most likely to be a Super Bowl contender are the Denver Broncos. Whether it's Paxton Lynch or Trevor Siemian going forward, doesn't really matter. Their defense is still studly. They can do just enough as on offense to get the job done. They don't turn the ball over a ton. Frankly, they're better off as a team last year all around, or this year all around, than they were last year, in large part because they don't have Peyton Manning turning the ball over every 2 or 3 damn possessions. This is something I kind of underrated coming into the season, but I did allude to it and talk about it before the season, is that the Denver Broncos, if they get even adequate quarterback play, are going to be a better team. This is a scary team. They're a legit threat to go to the Super Bowl. They're a legit threat to win the Super Bowl this year. No question about it. You've got some pleasant surprise teams, a bunch of teams at 3-1 that maybe some we thought could be there, some we didn't. You look at the Baltimore Ravens at 3-1, the Oakland Raiders at 3-1, coming off of that road victory against the Ravens. You've got the Dallas Cowboys behind a rookie 4th-round quarterback in Dak Prescott at 3-1, the Atlanta Falcons at 3-1, and the Los Angeles Rams with Case Keenum, for God's sakes, at their starting quarterback at 3-1. And included in those 3 victories are victories over the Seattle Seahawks and the Arizona Cardinals. They're 2-1 in that division. Imagine if they didn't get shut out opening night by the San Francisco 49ers, what we talk about with this Rams team right now. Some really surprise teams. Out of those surprise teams, I don't know that Baltimore has the goods. I think they benefited early on with playing a soft schedule. The Oakland Raiders, I think, could definitely stick around in the playoff mix, but they've got to get better on the defensive side of the ball. The Dallas Cowboys really benefit from 2 things. One, a weak NFC East, and frankly, a weaker NFC as a whole. They're a playoff contender at this point in time, a division contender for sure. The Atlanta Falcons, I don't know if they have staying power, but frankly, if the Carolina Panthers don't hurry up and figure it out, the Atlanta Falcons can run away with that division. And for the Los Angeles Rams, it's probably, right now, it looks like come down between them and the Seattle Seahawks. I don't know, again, if they have staying power, but if they can find ways to win games ugly and Aaron Donald continues to play like he wants to be the best defensive player in football and be the defensive player of the year, then they have a chance. You have some disappointing teams. The Indianapolis Colts are 1-3. I know for some that's not that big of a surprise, but they're still a disappointing team. It's one of those teams you look at them and you say they have a franchise quarterback. They should be better, and they should. You've got some injuries on defense, granted, but that's not an excuse. They just are not good. They get off to horrendous starts. Their defense stinks. They can't stop the run. They can't defend the pass. It's not a winning combination. So while having a franchise quarterback is important, the Indianapolis Colts are further proof that just because you have a franchise quarterback, it doesn't sweep away all your ills, and it is not a guarantee of automatically being a championship contending team. Benefit for them, though, is that they do play in that booty-ass AFC South, so even at 1-3, they still have to know that they're right in the mix. And if they handle business within the division, outside of obviously losing to Jacksonville and London, they can still make the playoffs. And once you get to the playoffs, anything can happen. The real disappointing teams, though, have to be the Carolina Panthers and the Arizona Cardinals. The two teams that faced off in the NFC Championship game last year, the two best teams in the NFC last year, bar none, are sitting at a combined 2-6. They're each 1-3. Arizona is in trouble because teams, I think, have figured out that if you could take away the big play from the Arizona offense, they lack the patience to be able to go on long, sustained drives. They're just not built for that, and that's really affecting them right now. And something is missing. Same thing with the Carolina Panthers. Maybe losing Josh Norman was a bad thing in that secondary because they're getting lit up. See Julio Jones going for 300 yards receiving. Matt Ryan throwing for over 500 yards on him. The pass rush isn't getting home enough. Offensively, they lack balance in the running game. And in terms of the passing game, they're just not getting the big-time explosive plays they got last year on the way to a 15-1 regular season. Can the Carolina Panthers and Arizona Cardinals turn it around? Yes, in large part, if nothing else, because the fact the NFC is weak this year. It is such doo-doo. I mean, and you look at some of the teams like the Rams and the Cowboys and the Falcons and, yes, even the Eagles, and you sit there and say, are they really better teams than the Panthers and the Cardinals when all is said and done? I don't know. I have a little more faith and confidence in the Panthers being able to turn it around and make a run at it, in part because they play in the weaker NFC South. As far as the Cardinals go, though, they could be in some trouble. It's close to panic time there. Winners and losers from this week. I'll start off with the winners. The Buffalo Bills looked terrible the first 2 weeks of the year. They were 0-2, and, you really start to wonder. Then they dominate the Arizona Cardinals, and then they basically dominated a Tom Brady-less New England Patriots team. This is the season in a lot of ways for Rex Ryan. This is mission number one, and he accomplished it. Congratulations, you're still a bum and your team's not making the playoffs. But for 1 week and 1 week alone, it's happy times in Buffalo land because the Bills beat the damn Patriots. The Oakland Raiders got a tough road win on the East Coast, beating the Ravens in Baltimore. The Raiders are sitting there at 3-1, and their defense hasn't shown up at all. If their defense can show up whatsoever, this is a team to reckon with a little bit. The Atlanta Falcons, you got to give props to them coming back off of the Monday night game against New Orleans, winning in that fashion. Now you got to turn around and you got to play the Carolina Panthers 6 days later. They came out and dominated them. I mean, Matt Ryan and Julio Jones were absolutely spectacular. I mean, they not only beat the Carolina Panthers, they put the Carolina Panthers 2 games behind them in the division at 1-3, and not only that, the Atlanta Falcons really effectively put them 2.5 games behind 4 games into the year because the Falcons now have a win over them, which is a de facto tiebreaker. I mean, a wonderful week of football for the Falcons between beating the Saints on Monday night and then coming back 6 days later and dominating Carolina Panthers. And you got to give credit to Los Angeles Rams, too. 3-1 is 3-1. And you talk about this, you can talk about that, but they beat the Seahawks and they beat the Cardinals. And you got to take them at least a little bit seriously right now. They're leading that division, and they look like they have a formula that can keep them in the mix during the course of this season. In terms of the losers, the Detroit Lions. This is a team even at 1-2. I was expecting to be able to beat the Bears. They were behind Matthew Stafford, able to score points, and then their offense just didn't show up in week number 4. Their defense was adequate, but not nearly as good as it should have been, and the offense only managed to score 6 points against a bad Bears defense. That's an embarrassing performance for a Lions team that should have been a whole lot better. And that type of effort makes you really wonder if Jim Caldwell is the right guy for the job, or if nothing else, he's just starting to lose the team and he's not going to be there come the end of the season. The Carolina Panthers, the Arizona Cardinals, I've already talked about it. They're both 1-3 when they were both viewed as potentially Super Bowl contenders, potentially teams that could go on to win the Super Bowl. I mean, you have to look at that. 1-3 is 1-3. That's the reality right now, is neither one of these teams are very good. Both of these teams are underachieving to the nth degree. Perhaps the biggest losers of the week, though, ironically enough, might be the Kansas City Chiefs. You're coming into the game facing off against a Pittsburgh Steelers team that just got embarrassed the week before by a rookie quarterback in the Philadelphia Eagles. You're on Sunday night primetime football, and you let the Steelers steamroll you. I mean, they just trounced them. You're watching Big Ben and Antonio Brown and Le'Veon Bell and Sammy Coates hit them for all these big plays, and the Chiefs are sitting there and dinking and dunking with Alex Smith. And this is the type of team, again, behind Alex Smith, that if they get behind in any way, shape, or form, typically if they're facing any team that's worth anything at all, they're in real trouble because they just don't have the big play explosiveness that they need. They don't have the quarterback that can stretch the field vertically. They got to be able to keep games close. And that was an embarrassing, pathetic performance by them. You know, in the first quarter, the Steelers have already scored 3 touchdowns, and it's already a wrap. I mean, that defense should be better, and frankly, that offense can be at least a little bit better. That was an embarrassing performance. Well, feel free to chime in and let me know what you think about the undefeated teams and their chances going forward, the surprise team, the disappointing teams, and who you thought were the winners and losers from week number 4 of the 2016 NFL season.